You have also mentioned in the past, altcoin will outperform bitcoins.
Will be bigger than Bitcoin. My mind is very similar to Bitcoin is gold and utility tokens is a stock market.
Any coins that you are extremely bullish on that could outperform bitcoin?
Is already outperforming Bitcoin.
This is Yat Siu, the man behind Animoca Brands, one of the most powerful companies in Web3, who has invested in more than 600 plus startups shaping the future of the internet.
Through early bets on projects like OpenSea, Axie Infinity, and the Sandbox, billions of dollars of value have been created across the crypto and gaming economy. Many people see him as one of the biggest believers in the future of altcoins, the builder behind an entire generation of Web3 projects. Today, we sit down with the man helping shape the next wave of the crypto economy.
In 2026, what do you think is the upcoming big narrative that you are putting your money into?
The first one that we like a lot is agentic AI. It's a $7 to $10 trillion market.
It looks like you are very bullish on AI stuff right now.
Who isn't?
Where you made the highest return if we talk about the numbers?
I think maybe 4,000% or something.
You have just $1,000 or maybe $10,000 to invest in crypto. How would you diversify your portfolio? What would you put in which coins?
I would just put it.
What was the turning point for you where you made the highest?
The highest returns have come from things like Sandbox, Axie Infinity, OpenSea perhaps, that is worth billions of dollars.
Someone 19 or 22-year-old watching this video right now want to get started into as a VC and want to build their career.
I don't advise anyone to start a career as a VC because it might sound glamorous to just like invest and put money.
What would be the one piece of advice you will give to someone?
It's easy to say, but don't chase the shiny new objects.
For the viewers first time discovering you, who is Yat and what do you do today?
My name is Yat. I'm chairman, co-founder of Animoca Brands. I run a Web3 blockchain company. It's kind of a digital conglomerate. We have over 628 portfolio companies. We're probably most known for, gaming and metaverse, but actually we're really sort of do a lot more. We make investments, we incubate projects. We're in DeFi, DePIN, AI, basically everything, adjacent to Web3 and tokenization.
What are you most proud of? Like, if we see three things that you feel most proud of in last 35 years as an entrepreneur.
So, what am I most proud of? I think this is a difficult question because it's like asking, like picking your favorite children. On that topic, I'm probably most proud of, I have 3 children and a family. We've been married we'll be married this year for 25 years.
Congratulations.
Which I'm proud of because, people say it's difficult to run a business. Try marriage for 25 years, right? And I don't mean this in a bad way. But you learn a lot, right? Because there's a lot of ups and downs. It's sometimes emotional. And then you have work. In a relationship like that, you compete not only with relationships, you compete with work, with requirements, with your children, right? In terms of attention and time. And now I have, 2 children in college and quasi work for one of them, another one in Hong Kong. And I would say things advancing reasonably well, knock on wood, right? Everything's working okay. And, I think, ultimately, I think for most people, I think that's what they aspire for, right? I'm also feel very privileged that the work that I do has an impact on millions of people. I think that's a privilege. Am I proud of that? I don't know, in the sense of, I wouldn't say it's a personal pride. I would say it feels more like a duty. So I wouldn't call it pride per se, but I think it's something that's important, and I think it's a privilege that I'm in this position. But I'm proud of my family, and I'm proud of my children, and I'm proud of my wife.
Do you believe in work-life balance, like as you are a family man right now?
So I don't believe in work-life balance, not because I don't believe that you need to do stuff that is good for you in terms of balance that works for you, but the word balance implies to me equal. Right. So when people say work-life balance, I often cringe a little, not because I don't think you shouldn't have a balance, but balance is not 50-50. Right. And it's also different times in life. So for instance, I don't like the idea that, I need to work 8 hours and then I need to, not work for 8 hours as a kind of work-life balance. Right. That to me doesn't work because life doesn't work this way. It's in fact, life is chaotic. So you have to sort of balance it based on whatever feels right to you at that moment. So sometimes, especially, in crypto, sometimes I have to work 80 or 90% of the time, right? And that can be weeks, especially as my kids are older. So I don't have to spend as much time with them as I used to when they're smaller, because frankly, they don't want to spend that much time with me. Then you have, you should sometimes spend 100% of your day just dealing with work. And I think that's okay, as long as everyone else around you is okay, because that's, maybe your mission, your purpose, that's what drives you. And then for other people, it's the other way around, right? For other people, they want to focus mostly on family, and that's okay too, right? So I think the question isn't so much what is work-life balance, or do you have work-life balance? I think the question is more, for me at least, what is your purpose, right? And if your purpose is family or work or other forms of life, sports, athleticism, whatever that may be, and you find that is your purpose, then that's fine. That's how you live it. Is there a balance? I don't think we can think of it that way. I think we just live our purpose and the balance will come.
What's your purpose now?
Well, right now, I feel like my purpose is to, we all spoke about what we call driving digital property rights. To me, that's the foundation of creating a much more equitable world on the basis that we can own stakes in the networks that we helped build. So I think of it as a duty, but I think of it as my purpose because, I have a background, growing up in Europe, experiencing both extreme forms of socialism and then, of course, extreme forms of capitalism, which, being in the US and then later on in Hong Kong, I've seen sort of full circle, sort of both extremes, and both have problems. And I think there's an opportunity to sort of reshape the world in a better way. And I think I have a unique perspective and I enjoy doing it. And so I think that, part of my purpose is to sort of share what I've learned to try to help make the world a better place.
What about like crypto? When was the first time you heard the word Bitcoin or crypto, and what fascinated you the most?
Well, I heard about Bitcoin quite early, I think, because, in tech circles, people talk about Bitcoin.
Which year?
I'm going to guess maybe 2014, 2015, something like that, right? So not like OG, but pretty early. I had a deep interest in distributed computing. For those who might know what that is, in terms of SETI, I was actually, running probably one of Hong Kong's biggest SETI nodes. So SETI was basically, it's kind of science fiction, funny stuff, in the sense that we had all these computers that would basically try to decipher and basically see if there was extraterrestrial life by hearing signals, and that would then get processed in our computers. And if we find it, we could win the SETI prize, right? And I'm going to say this was maybe, 2000, 2001, or maybe even before. We were basically running, maybe in the 90s. Sorry, it was like 95, 96, 97 or something like that. And it was kind of a geeky, fun thing. So I always was interested in distributed computing. But when Bitcoin came about, when I first heard about it, it was curiosity, but it was about money, right? Bitcoin was, at the time, really discussed as a new form of money and as a better and sort of more transparent and, sort of safer sort of, currency, shall we say. That didn't appeal to me. And the reason it didn't appeal to me is, one, I wasn't particularly financially literate. Like, I was a builder. I was building companies. I was in technology, but money wasn't the thing that mattered to me the most, right? So that was kind of alien to me. And then the second thing was new forms of money. Like everyone else probably was thinking, like most people, right? They're probably thinking, well, what do we need a different kind of money, right? Like, at that point, I didn't really care too much about inflation. I didn't care that much about what was happening with QE. These are things that didn't matter to me at that time. And also because I grew up in Europe. In Europe, we don't talk much about money, right? The whole point, when you start talking about money, it's considered a little bit dirty.
Taboo.
Yeah, taboo. Yeah, exactly. And if you talk about money, then, there's something weird with you, right? So it was all that type of stuff as well, mixed with this, right? So you kind of sort of don't talk about it, right? So all these factors essentially kind of turned me off on that, right? I really just got into the space because of NFTs.
NFT.
So
Which year?
I was 2017.
2017.
So
CryptoKitties.
yes. So our studio was involved in building CryptoKitties. So at that point, we were a game studio. And that was actually part of the history of Animoca. We're a game company, and we're basically building games. We had some very popular mobile games. And in 2017, one of our studios in Vancouver was helping essentially another company, at the time Axiom Zen, before they basically became Dapper Labs or spun out Dapper Labs, to help them game design and develop this sort of cute little application called CryptoKitties.
That's cool. So, like, came to know about this whole NFT space and from CryptoKitties in 2017, right?
And because we were involved in building it.
Yeah. You are the man behind one of the most successful investments in crypto. And you saw it before coming it. Like, you invested in NFTs and virtual stuff before it became mainstream in 2021. Right now, in 2026, what do you think is the upcoming big narrative that you are putting your money into?
So when I talk about the narratives that we're focusing on now, it's around the utility or the potential of the utilities that we see. So it's not specifically storytelling. It's around what could happen if you're successful, or it has huge areas of growth. So there's really, let's call them 3 or 4 categories. The first one that we like a lot is agentic AI.
Agentic AI.
Yeah. Now, by agentic AI, I don't mean like ChatGPT, that kind of stuff. I literally mean an agent that does work for you. And I think OpenClaw really opened up people's imagination as to what's possible, even if it is taking over your whole personal profile and everything else, which I think is quite dangerous. Yep. So we launched something called Animoca Minds, right? And Animoca Minds is basically our own agentic platform that uses all the similar LLMs, but is basically able to do everything in a cloud version and basically communicating with you over email, over Telegram, later on WhatsApp and Messenger, and can do all the tasks that essentially an assistant, a travel agent can do, except it also has a wallet, which means that it can do trading and all that kind of stuff, right? And why do we care about agentic AI and the sort of agentic, what we describe as the agentic web and the agentic economy? So everything around that is going to use tokens, right? If the way that we can think about the web is going away, because we're no longer going to a website, we're just having AI basically answer the question and tell us what we're looking for. So if you remember, I guess you use Google, right?
Yep.
So when you used to go to Google, you would get a link, and then you go click the link and you go to the website.
Correct.
I don't think you do that much anymore, right? Basically, you're just getting the summary from Gemini, and then you say, that's good enough. Next question, right?
Yep.
ChatGPT as well. So really, the current version of LLMs that most people are using it at is just Search 2.0 or Search 3.0, whatever you want to call it. It's just a better search. That's how most people do it. I have a question, you give me the answer, right? Agentic AI is different. Agentic AI is not about sort of, give me the better answer. Agentic AI is about action. It comes to you with something and you make a decision. So from doing the work, you're actually now making more decisions. A good agent will give things to you where you have to make a decision, and it's ready to execute on something, whether it's do this, do that, travel booking, make code, whatever that is, right? And that's very clearly where the future is going. So if you think that's the future, then what are the things to make that future a reality? Those are the areas that we'd like to invest in. So what's one of them? Digital identity. Digital DIDs is going to be massive because of agents. It's not going to be massive for humans because we have other ways in which we can manage our identity. Sure, we're not going to all share a passport, but digital identity has had a bit of a struggle taking off because humans might not be willing to share all their data. How do you aggregate it together? But AI agent is totally different. If I'm going to trade with an AI agent, I need to know who you are. I need to know who owns you, or I need to know who at least attests you, because they are a blank sheet. They have no idea. Plus, the AI agent doesn't know if you're a fake Yat Siu or a real Yat Siu. They have no idea, right? So DID solves this. And we saw what happened when OpenClaw launched. You probably have hundreds of thousands of people using OpenClaw with their installations, and you have millions of bots.
Yep.
And that's exactly what we think is going to happen, with agents on chain. Agentic agents are going to be 10 to 20 times the ratio of the human number. So if you have 100 million people using agents, there's going to be at least 1 to 1.5 billion agents that are going to go around. And they are the ones who essentially need that digital passport. They need the DIDs. So that's an example, right? MCP servers, right? Economies where people basically trade tokens. If I'm an agent and I'm receiving information, you're the content creator, you're not going to be okay that the agent just takes your data. You're going to say, hey, this is my news, pay me. Because advertising is going away. So that means the agent is paying a subscription, except the subscription is maybe shared across 20 or 30 or 40 different content providers. That's all happening in the back, right? And what's the system that they're going to use to exchange the value? It's going to be a token infrastructure, right? So those are examples where we say, okay, if we believe in an agentic future, then all the puzzle pieces around this we would invest. We did this with gaming as well. When we saw, when we believed in that the gaming would be big, we invested in NFT marketplaces. We invested in the L1s that basically, or L2s that were focusing on gaming, right? We're basically investing in sort of marketplaces of all sorts, right? That was the thesis point. And then basically when that market started to grow, they all started to grow together. And we think the same will happen with basically agentic AI. Related to that is another area, of course, that we love a lot, which is education. Now with education, it's a $7 to $10 trillion market, right? And Open Campus, our EDU token, is sort of at the center of this. But the challenging thing about education is that a lot of people don't seem to care about it. So the narrative isn't very strong. But the fundamental on education is very, very, very big. I mean, from a culture standpoint, I'm sure your parents made you study a lot, right?
I dropped out.
Okay, sure. But I mean, I would say many of your fellow Indians probably.
Asians.
Yes, exactly, right? And they spend most of their money on educating their kids, right? So it's a huge market, right? Student loans is a $3 trillion industry, right? The entire industry is massive, right? So much money in it, nobody's doing it. So we said, hey, that's a market segment that matters. Plus, we want to make education better. So you can both be advancing society and you can potentially make money in a sector that has essentially what's described as a blue ocean, right? You want to go for a market that isn't a competitor. Right now, I can tell you, I think every other day I'm getting a prediction market proposal from investment, right? Or some kind of betting platform, right? And that's because everyone's liking prediction market because they look at Polymarket and say, I can do this better, I can do this way. But, the world doesn't need 1,000 prediction markets, right?
Totally.
Right? And so that's what you would describe as a red ocean, right? In the sense that everyone's doing the same thing. The chances of you succeeding is much lower because you have so much competition.
Correct.
And yet people somehow are funding different prediction markets all the time. And I'm not saying that there aren't potential for good prediction markets. I'm just saying it's much more competitive than before, whereas education seems not to be that populated. And that's why, for instance, we like education as well. And so we're focused on that because nobody else is talking about it. And, it's easy to look back and say, oh, yeah, gaming seems obvious. It was not obvious in 2018. Everyone was not interested in gaming, right? They were not interested in 2018. They were not interested in 2019. They were starting to get interested in 2020. And then in 21 really, really took off. And now, despite what some people are saying, gaming is still the highest on-chain activity, right? And has the highest usage of the various blockchain protocols.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm very curious to know, as you mentioned, AI agent have improved the way we search, right? And right now, because
AI agents, sort of LLMs. So AI today has improved the way that we search. AI agent is going to just change completely the way we discover and use the internet. It will completely change it.
Okay. So after they are doing the action on our behalf, what will be the next stage? After they are doing the action?
Well, what happens is that if they action on our behalf, then all the content is fed to us. Our behavior will change from the doing into decision framing. So that means that we're going to be doing things that are based on telling our agents what choices to make and what content to make because they're going to come with us with ideas, right? I mean, think about it right now, right? If you use ChatGPT, you ask a question, it gives you an answer, you move on. There's no persistent state. ChatGPT doesn't come back to you. I mean, if you have a workspace and set it up a certain way, maybe, but it doesn't come back to you and say, oh, remember 3 days ago, you were talking to me about this. Are you still interested in this? Do you still want that? Because you don't use it that way, right? You really just use it as a function for that moment in time. The memory and the relevance is that moment, right? And not beyond, and not before and not after. Those are things that don't matter. But if you have an AI, which is really the purpose of an agent, with a persistent memory, it has a history. It knows what you did before. It can also infer behavior. And from that, it will give you what you want more precisely and more better. And I think this is the reason why when people installed OpenClaw, that was the magic. The magic of OpenClaw is not that it was a better LLM. They use all the other LLMs that everyone else uses. The magic was that it had a new data source, which was your personal data, to understand more about you, and then basically create things that are important to you because it understood that, and it was able to action and program on that kind of stuff. When you're using like our own product, Animoca Minds, right? If I want to create it, give it a skill, I communicate it just like I would with an assistant. I say, hey, check this, do this, and then they create a capability without actually having to know how to code. Because on the back, it does all of the programming, and effectively, you've essentially created different skills, which are basically pieces of code that normally only a coder could do, even if they use Cursor or something, right? Vibe coding. Vibe coding is okay, but if you don't have background in coding, it's hard. But essentially, with a sort of agentic framework, you don't have to do really much because the AI will do everything else for you. And with the new models like Opus, it's going to get just even faster, right? So it's about basically what the AI agent can do. And if you look at Web3, when you talk about sort of Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, people talk about that web of ownership. The last 4 or 5 years was the setup for agents. What I mean by that is, when CryptoKitties came, it crashed Ethereum at 40 million.
Correct.
Now, Ethereum can transact billions of dollars, no problem whatsoever. This is the perfect sort of framework that an agent can now transact in, right? Because you can now do DeFi, and you can do prediction market, and you can do all that kind of stuff at fast, speed, reliable, all that kind of stuff. Perfect for an AI agent. If that didn't exist, AI agents wouldn't be able to build on top, and they wouldn't also be interoperable. Because if I'm building an AI agent on top of Facebook or on top of Microsoft, they're not going to talk to each other. They're competitive product. You have to use a Microsoft agent, or you have to use a Facebook agent, or you have to use a ChatGPT agent, right? But if you build on blockchain, it's completely interoperable. Your assets can flow together. I don't care which LLM you use. I don't even care which agent you use. I can just work with you, and we can just trade and do stuff and do business with each other because it's on the blockchain, and the agent knows, oh, this is a real Bitcoin, or this is a USDC, or this is a SAN token or a Mocha token. It doesn't matter. I'll be able to basically to just do transaction because I can verify it and do that at scale. So we've had this setup now for agents essentially to exist essentially on chain and do this. And so we think this phase, this era we're entering is, I don't know if you call it Web 4, but it's the agentic web, right? And this agentic web is also going to change how we discover things. Anytime there is a massive shift in where you discover things, as in distribution, the world changes entirely. Okay. The last big moment we had of that was the smartphone. When you had Apple was making computers and they had the iPod, but they were not nearly as powerful until the iPhone came out.
Correct.
Right? But they weren't selling more phones. They basically got a platform that helped people discover things differently from the web. At that point, people were going to Facebook, or people were downloading, and they weren't downloading stuff, right? Everyone was still going to a website, right? They were using Flash and they were using Java, right? And those experiences were essentially web experiences, right? When the App Store came, we started downloading things, right? And the apps basically completely changed the way we discover things and broke existing distribution models and created new ones. And that basically redrew the power structure of the internet entirely, right? But now, think about why Web3 couldn't grow so fast, even though it had many advantages. Who owns the distribution? Apple, Facebook, Google, right?
Correct.
Steam. They've been restricting blockchain.
Correct.
If I want to upload a game with NFTs, you can't use it. If I want to do something in crypto, Google might not allow it, right? All of them are restricting it. So the ability for blockchain-related projects and tokens to be used essentially are restricted. And just actually yesterday, X announced that you're not allowed to basically promote crypto on X.
Really?
It's a paid promotion. So if you're a crypto project, you will not be allowed to basically use money to advertise your project. You can still talk about it, but you can't promote it, right? This is in the new terms. It's all over X. You can check it out, right? And this demonstrates what happens when you give central power to essentially, the whole point about decentralization is that it's not censorable. But here they decided to censor crypto companies. Why did they decide to censor crypto companies? Did the lawyers say it? Does Elon not want it? Like, we don't know. They don't have to explain. They just change the rules, and that's it, right? So that's the risk on this one, and that's why crypto companies and Web3 wasn't able to grow as fast as we had hoped. But with an agent, they don't care if it's your agent. They're going to look for the things on the internet, not based on restrictions, but based on what is best for you. It's not what's best for the platform, right? And you can't stop the agent from finding the project you're looking for.
Correct.
Right? Whereas on Apple, they're censoring it. If you're crypto, I don't want you to see it. But if it's an agent, he's going to find it for you, and you don't care how it is. You're just going to get it, right? So this is another point where the entire distribution format is going to completely break and change, because I'm no longer going to Google's website. I'm no longer going to ChatGPT's. I'm not going to the New York Times. It's all coming to me. So from a distribution standpoint, it completely alters the landscape, and that's where everything gets redrawn and reshaped, and that's why it's both exciting and very, very powerful.
Okay. Well, like, it looks like you're very bullish on AI stuff right now.
Who isn't?
Totally. Any altcoins that you are targeting right now that you see a lot of potential, especially in AI?
So, as I said, when we think about the potential of AI, we look at the entire space.
Correct.
Where we think AI has to use these tools. So one of the things that we're really, really bullish on is Mocha because of digital identity, right? We think the growth of Mocha will come from digital identity because it's a DID platform. However, who's going to be the biggest customer of DID? It's going to be agents. That's why we are, for instance, bullish on that, right? Similarly, when you think about an agentic future, where do we think, like with Open Campus, one of the products that's, really powerful and it's starting to sort of take off a little bit is called Eddie. Eddie is essentially an AI tutor for kids, right? And again, do we think, basically AI tutoring is going to be really important for children? We think so, right? Is there a way for teachers to earn from that, for the token economy? Okay, that could work, right? So, EDU is a token that we like a lot as well for that reason, right? So we look at it from that lens, right? We're obviously also investors in tokens like virtuals and that kind of stuff, but virtuals is more of a platform broadly. And, while we're obviously supportive, that's not where we would have most of our attention around this, because it's more about the tokens launching on virtuals rather than necessarily virtuals as a platform in and of itself, right? So I'm looking more at infrastructure that I think every AI agent might want to use, like digital identity, maybe storage, possibly sort of decentralized compute as well, right? So for instance, when you look at what Ton, we're big investors in the Ton ecosystem. Ton has had a bit of a rough period, like all of the tokens, right? However, they built Cocoon, right? And Cocoon is basically their AI infrastructure, which is basically native to Ton. And is distributed and decentralized compute that can be held in a sovereign manner. And so if you think that you want to keep your data safe and not in a centralized area, then you might want to use Cocoon. And Cocoon is also based on the Telegram Ton ecosystem. So then Ton token, by definition, would also be potentially sort of adjacent to that, right? So yes, it's factors like these, right? And of course, in the future, what we're building at Animoca Minds, we don't know whether there's going to be a token or not, right? But if you're using it, it makes sense for it to have a token economy, and eventually maybe there's going to be an airdrop or something in the future, but that's not certain yet.
That's the alpha there.
Yes.
Okay. So as you have invested in 600 plus crypto projects, what was the turning point for you where you made the highest return if we talk about the numbers?
Oh, so interesting. So the highest returns have come from things like Sandbox, Axie Infinity, OpenSea perhaps, but we've also done really well with Pixels. We've also done really well with Solana as well. So it's a whole range of things, right? I wouldn't say it's just I haven't done the numbers to say
what can be the X, multiple X, how much X?
I think the highest multiple we made was maybe 4,000. I think it was 4,000% or something.
4,000%.
Right? I think it was 4,000%, maybe possibly.
On which project?
That would have been either something like So something like Sandbox was much more than that. Sandbox would have been probably like more like 400x or something, or 400 or 500x. But those are sort of outliers, right? I don't think we can sort of specifically look at like one project and say, wow, amazing, because obviously it's circumstance as well. As I say, it's not you can pick them, but it's also based on luck as well, right? To some extent. But I like to talk about companies that sort of had growth and success based on a lot of the fundamentals. And Sandbox at the time had that fundamental. It was a Time magazine company, right? It brought all these people into the metaverse, including sort of Snoop Dogg, right? And then Axie Infinity did incredibly well as well, right? And Axie would have been also incredible return. I just haven't done the numbers, but it would have been, hundreds of X's, I guess, at the time, right? But like, for instance, projects that we're invested in today, whether it's like Humanity Protocol, for instance, right, or Layer Zero, right? I mean, these are all projects that are also very, 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 very sort of, valuable and important. And all of them, we've had reasonably good returns, right? So, because it all depends on your entry point, right? If your entry point is reasonably low, then it kind of doesn't matter what the price is at the end, because whether it's hundreds of millions or a billion, you're able to make money from it, and I think that's okay. I think the problem that a lot of people have is maybe they went in at a higher price point and then it's gone down. Obviously, that's difficult, right? And this is the whole point about why early stage is often, in that sense, good. But it's riskier.
Correct.
Because there's many companies that don't succeed, right? So it's basically sort of a batting average, right? I'll give you an example of a company that is sort of, very moonshotty in our portfolio. That's it's become quite important. It's a company called Colossal Biosciences. Okay. Colossal Biosciences is probably best known for trying to restore the woolly mammoth. Like, it's literally Jurassic Park, right? If you look it up, they successfully restored the dire wolf from Game of Thrones.
Okay.
So this is an animal that was basically extinct for tens of thousands of years and is now back on Earth.
Damn.
Right. So you check it out. Pretty cool, right? When we invested in the company was a $300 million valuation as their seed round.
Seed round 300 million.
At the time, because they were, biotech is expensive.
Yep.
I mean, some of the seed round for AI companies is billions, right? So it's all relative. And what happened was, we invested because we thought this is a company that in the future we should tokenize. This was in 21. But then the whole market collapsed, FTX happened, all that stuff, and we just put the tokenization on ice. And then last year, they basically succeeded in creating the woolly mammoth. The dire wolf, right? And then it became a leader in cloning and other forms of biotechnology, right? And they just closed their last round literally weeks ago at $10 billion valuation.
$10 billion valuation.
Yeah. Right. And so it kind of gives you an idea of sort of how to think about this. Like, we're not thinking about it just in terms of like what the returns will come if the project and the outcome is big enough and the vision and, of course, the ability to execute is there. I mean, we could invest in a company and they just don't execute. And I think that's one of the problems in crypto is that a lot of people have a lot of good ideas and they launch a token, but they can't execute, or maybe they don't even want to execute, right? And so that's different. So again, I go back to utility. Is it fundamentally a company that is trying to build? Even if it doesn't succeed, right? They're actually people who are building and grinding and sort of constructing. That's the important part, whereas there's so many projects where people, they call them rugs, yes or no. But the point is that, they work on it for 6 months and a year and they say, you know what, like, I don't want to do this anymore. I got some tokens, I made some money, and they leave. Right? And that's bad for the industry, right? And these are not the projects we want to support.
Like, after investing in 600 plus projects, what is a framework or 3 filters any normal investor can use to know which can be a moonshot or a 100x return, or which can go to zero?
I mean, if I had the perfect formula, then I think we'd be much bigger, right?
Yep.
So the short answer is, I don't think it's very predictive. It's based on thesis. So if you believe in the future, then whatever that future may be, is it gaming? Is it agents? Is it education? Right? Then you invest towards that direction. You could be wrong. But if you think that is important and you have a good sort of thesis and you've intellectually debated it with different people, then you're comfortable that you make these investments from a moonshot standpoint. It's very easy to analyze a size of a market. What's harder is executing.
Correct.
Right? You can say, oh my goodness, China is a big market, India is a big market. Sure. but do you know how to sell there? Do you know how to execute? All that type of stuff? Much, much harder, right? So that means the team itself has to prove and know how to do that. And that's all part of the due diligence, right? Just because your idea is big and your product has potential, do you actually have what it takes to do that, right? And, one of the things that we like a lot about investing is when it's a bear market. And when we sort of, some of our best returns come from bear markets, like, when we did all the gaming investments in 2018 and 2019, remind people that in December 2018, I think Bitcoin was $3,000. Okay. So, and the reason why it's a good time to invest is not because prices are low and whatever. That's obviously an opportunity spectrum. You can buy Bitcoin. It's because any founder who's still building when the market is shit is doing it for more than just money.
Okay.
If you're building only for the money, there's many ways to make money, right? So that's why it's harder to invest when it's a bull market, because in the bull market, everyone says the right thing, but you don't know whether they're very serious, and you have to then analyze and study and talk and sort of understand it better. But if it's a bear market and you're still building, or you're excited about it, then there's a good chance you believe in the long-term vision, because this bear market could be longer, right? You don't know, right? Yep. Right, and so you're willing to grind it through. Also, if you're able to build in a bear market, you're able to build with little money, right? In comparison to, it's a bull market and you have all this money, and then often they waste the money because they're used to spending it in a high way in order to get market share and so forth, and then suddenly they have to downsize, and they don't really know how to do that.
So according to you, bear market is the place where real opportunities are made.
I mean, look, it's all about risk management, right?
Okay.
At the end of the day, even if it's a bear market, I'm not suggesting that, okay, just because it's a bear market, you should start investing. You have to be comfortable yourself. You have to do the homework, right? But we like bear markets more than we like bull markets in that sense.
Okay.
Right. And so we, right now, we consider the market somewhat bearish. Fear level is very, very high, right? So we think those are good opportunities, right? Because if everyone else is out, then you're not competing with them, provided that you believe in crypto and provided that you believe in the long term, right? And we're long-term investors. So we're not thinking about, a flip. If you're a trader, you have a different mindset. You're thinking about next week, you're thinking about next 24 hours, you're thinking about next 2 hours. That's great if you're a trader, but it's not how we function as an operating business, right? As an operating business, we need to basically just think about the long-term picture. So if you make an investment, we're thinking we're going to hold to that investment for a very, very long time.
Let's say, Yat, you are right now 20 or 22-year-old and starting in crypto right now, okay? And you have just off like $1,000 or maybe $10,000 to invest in crypto. How would you diversify your portfolio? What would you put in which coins?
So it depends what the perspective is. But if I am an entrepreneur, which if I was 20, 21, I would probably be an entrepreneur, right? And I would probably build my own project. I would just put it all in my own project, right? And the reason I do this is because I think you have to be your own believer, right? I mean, it may not work, but we want founders that are all in on themselves.
Correct.
Right? We don't want, and again, I'm not saying, if you have a family and stuff, yeah, you diversify your assets and so on. Of course, you should plan a certain way, right? But if you're 20 and 21, you probably don't have a family,
correct,
right? You're probably single. Maybe you have a girlfriend, that's fine, or boyfriend, or whatever it is, right? But the point is that, you can afford to take chances, right? And so, take the chance, right? So if you're a 20, 21-year-old, you can earn your money, right? Because build in the things that you believe in. Now, again, I'm not saying you should be sort of, I think the problem with meme coins and so on is often it's gone into this whole YOLO attitude around just, just gamble and degen and that kind of stuff. That's different as well, right? Because when you basically invest in yourself, you're not investing only in the return of that moment. You're investing in your long-term potential. Because I might lose all the money I invested in my own project, but I will have learned a lot.
Correct.
Right? And the next project I do will be better. Or the company I will be hired by will appreciate the failure you had because there are lessons you've experienced that nobody else in that business would have had, right? So essentially, it's investing in yourself, right? And then, what we do as investors is we back founders and companies that have this kind of mindset from an entrepreneur standpoint. And we would much rather people would invest in long-term projects in those kind of people because one, they're long-term, right? It's not about the quick flip. And two, these people, even if they don't succeed now, and possibly you might lose some money, there's a high likelihood that that type of personality is going to build something great sometime in the future, right? If it's not now, maybe it's in the next project or the project after or the project after, because these are typically also high integrity people, right? Because money isn't the most important thing. They want to build something and they want to commit to it, right? As opposed to people who are just thinking, they want to do a quick trade, which is, fine. We have no objections, if you want to do that, but that's not how we would operate.
Mm-hmm. And you have also mentioned in the past, altcoin will outperform bitcoins.
Will be bigger than Bitcoin.
Will be bigger
as a
than
collective. Yes.
As a collective.
Yes.
Many people are asking when alt season is coming. What's your thought on that?
So let me first define when I say altcoins, I typically mean utility tokens.
Utility tokens.
Yeah. So I'm less bullish on meme coins. I'm not saying meme coins are going away. They're going to be here. They're going to keep trading Dogecoin and Bonk and all that kind of fun stuff, right? And they have cultural value, but the volatility will remain high. And the long-term value accrual doesn't exist because it's a meme coin, right? It's not supposed to have that, right? So it's sort of, it's like a meme stock, right? Whereas utility tokens have a purpose. And why is it important? It's because the crypto market today is very much dependent on institutional adoption. If your token doesn't have a way in which an institution can measure its success, they will not buy your token, right? So, is it possible that Fidelity, BlackRock, Franklin Templeton, all these large finance firms would buy a utility token? Yes, if there's usage. It doesn't matter if it's gaming or deepen, if it's big enough and has scale and size, and there's clear growth metrics that you can measure, they might invest in that. Are they going to invest in, a meme coin? Almost certainly not, because they can't justify the growth metrics. They can't measure it. They can't say, okay, this is why the token will grow, because it's funny, right? Because it has great cultural relevance. I mean, while that may be true, it doesn't have a way in which you can measure it. However, if you're a utility token, you can say, okay, is there a buyback? It's based on a company or a foundation. Maybe it's based on their profits. Maybe just based on their growth numbers. Like the things you can measure and then map out and see. And that's what basically these institutions like to see, right? So I mean the utility tokens combined. And why I say utility tokens is because the parallel in my mind is very similar to Bitcoin is gold. And utility tokens is a stock market.
Okay.
Right? Think about it, right? When we use Microsoft or NVIDIA or Apple or Google, we use their products, right? And they're listed on the stock market and there's a value accrual related to the success of using their product, right? But if I want to save money, I buy gold, right? And that's kind of similar in crypto.
Correct.
Like if I make money in altcoins, I tend to save some of it in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the one neutral asset that essentially everyone would agree, typically on a pure sort of, let's call it sort of digital perspective, is like functioning kind of like digital gold, even though lately it's been a bit more wonky. But generally speaking, that's the perspective, right? But why are utility tokens going to grow? Because it's what we use, right? So if we believe that billions of people are going to be using crypto, they're not going to be using Bitcoin. Nobody uses the Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is not money anymore, right? In terms of the vision, it's become a store of value, right? And today, that's what everyone thinks of it. Everyone who has Bitcoin is not thinking about spending it. Maybe it's used for collateral, but it's essentially an asset that, is there for liquidity support and for my piggy bank, but it's not really there for it to be used. Whereas it's different for Ethereum, it's different for Solana, it's different on gaming tokens. So you use it for gas fees, you use it for gaming, you use it for deepen, you use it for transactions, whatever that may be, right? Altcoins are the ones that I'm using in the ecosystem, right? And so if billions of people are going to go on chain, they're going to be using altcoins. And so to us, the value accrual is very clear, right? Now, when is it going to happen is a big question, right? And we think, it's going to happen sooner than we think, right? As the next 12, 18 months, there's going to be a lot of adoption because the agentic future, what we believe in, is going to drive everyone into crypto. One of the problems what we have in crypto right now, unlike what happened with NFTs and gaming, is that the growth on chain is not interoperable growth. What I mean by that is that it's happening in these silos that the people who are onboarded don't know that they're actually in crypto. Polymarket is a great example.
Correct.
Everyone who's using Polymarket, only a small number of people know that it's on Polygon blockchain, which is also interesting, right? Because it's it's giving so much value, you could say, to Polygon, but it hasn't had an impact on the token, right?
Correct.
Because the people who are using Polymarket don't know Polygon, right?
Yeah.
And they don't really care about Polygon, right? It's just infrastructure to them, right?
Yeah.
And what would happen though if the traders on Polymarket knew that the infrastructure was built on Polygon, right? And they knew that the assets in their wallet could be, maybe you put it in Aave and you get some yield when you start trading, before you start trading, for instance. They don't know that. They're just depositing money. They're just treating it like a Venmo or PayPal account. They're not thinking about that potential because they don't know it, right? And Polymarket doesn't have an incentive to open it up to others. There's nothing they want them to use the money captive in their areas, right?
Correct.
So that's the difference. Whereas in 21, 22, when you had an NFT, it was in your MetaMask. And when you're in MetaMask, you had all these possibilities presented to you. Trade on Uniswap, get some yield over here. And when you receive an airdrop, that airdrop went to your wallet. Then you're like, okay, how do I trade that airdrop? Oh, I have to go on Uniswap, or I have to go on airdrop, right? So the ecosystem growth was much more interoperable during the NFT growth period versus, with prediction markets that are in these walled they're not really walled gardens because it's on chain, but the user doesn't know that there is different marketplaces or different opportunities with the assets that you have, because you open up a wallet on Polymarket, it's their wallet in a way, right?
Correct. So like any 3 altcoins that you are extremely bullish on that could outperform Bitcoin according to you?
Well, I mean, EDU is already outperforming Bitcoin. I mean, it's obviously from a small base, so definitely EDU is on that list. I think Mocha has that potential from that perspective. And then if I had to pick another token, currently what I like a lot is Check.
Check.
So it's a chess, AnyChess.
Okay, AnyChess.
Yes, and the reason why, and this goes a little bit of my sort of thinking around where the token futures will go. We used to, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, gaming is dead. Nobody cares about Web3 gaming, all that kind of stuff," and I think that's very wrong. Not because that you see a lot of on-chain activity in gaming, but also because I think we've had the wrong idea about valuations, right? So when you launch a game and you invested at 10 or 20 million and it goes to 100 or 200 million, that's really good. Okay. But then sometimes people compare it to other protocols, like in the finance side, and they say, oh, but this token is worth billions and this token is only worth hundreds of millions. Obviously, this was a success, this was not. That's not how it works. It's about your entry point, right? And the real world is very much the same way. Right? You can't compare 2 different industries with the same price point. JP Morgan's market cap in finance is almost is $800 to $900 billion.
Okay.
Right. The biggest game company, either EA or maybe Roblox, is worth around 60 to 70 billion.
That's very small.
It's small compared to JP Morgan,
Correct.
but it's still a big business, right?
True.
My point is that successful gaming companies don't have to be billions of dollars. Successful gaming companies at the low hundreds or even tens of millions, depending what type of project, is just fine, right? And so I was pointing out to sort of AnyChess, basically the Check token, because that's a token project that launched at a fairly low valuation, now has an FTV of around 70 million, right? But is hovering at that level. And despite the fact that the market has been wild, has been maintaining it because it's the right valuation for it, right? And maybe it can go up and whatever, but you don't have to expect that token should be worth $1 billion, right? It's okay if it goes up 2 or 3x on this project, and the people playing the chess product enjoy it. And also it has a partnership with chess.com, that's 600 million players. Magnus Carlsen is supportive as well, basically the world chess champion, right? So there's many elements around that. And that's kind of, what I want to point out is that it's not necessarily about which one's going to give you a 10 or 20x, right? And which one's going to be billions of dollars worth, right? That's what many people try to chase. It's around 2 things. One, the valuation entry point, and the long-term picture as well, right? If you're thinking about the quick trade, then okay, good luck, right? I think it's very hard to trade the market. I think it's very hard to time it. Some people have strategies, good for you. Maybe an AI bot can help you, right? But it's hard. But if you invest in something long-term and you have conviction, then you don't care about the price movement as much, as long as you know that the project is actually building and doing stuff, right?
Correct. So like, as you mentioned, if you have to ask yourself, it is a utility project or not, and is institutions going to invest in that or not?
In the future, correct.
In the
Yes.
future, right? What other checklist you will have right now if you want to pick any good altcoins that can give good returns? Give me some checklist for any retail investor that they should tick on before investing in a project.
I mean, sustainability is important. right?
Sustainability.
So
By revenue?
No, meaning that is this a project that actually is already making money or has the ability to make money, right? So, and so that's why foundations are typically difficult
Okay.
because they're not really run as a for-profit. But if you're a gaming project or a deep end project, you essentially have turnover, you have profit, and that profit can then determine what you could do with it. And the reason we say this is because, during the Gensler era, tokens were not allowed to talk about utility. Because if they talk about utility,
Which era?
Gary Gensler.
Okay,
like
Gary
during
Gensler.
during the SEC.
I remember
era.
that time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So if you talked about how the token could be valuable, you would just basically get killed by the SEC, right? So every project basically didn't talk about it at all. Even if the project is successful, it can't say that it might buy it back or it might do a burn or all these things. They're just not allowed to talk about that,
Yep.
right? Now they can.
Yep.
Right. And so fundamentally, if you look for a project that has good fundamentals, we also think that those projects eventually are going to have to publish their financials. Right now, they don't have to because, there's no obligation to. And even if they have no obligation, are you more likely going to be investing in a project that discloses their financials? Or are you going to be only investing in projects that are meme coins and whatever, right? And we think that more investors that are long-term will care about the fundamental. The day trader is all going to just trade momentum,
Okay.
right? So whatever that is, it's up to them, right? That's not the audience. But if you're looking to sort of a project long-term, and I'm deploying capital, I will choose the project
Sustainable.
that is sustainable, that is transparent, and that is able to communicate to institutions, even if not today, in the future. So because if they are transparent, if they publish their financials, if it's a project that a institution can understand, right? Then whether it's this year or next year or the years after, people can start buying that and they will understand that, right? Because an institution can justify the investment, right? And so we think that's why utility tokens are ultimately going to win in the longer term in this sense, because the institution will buy utility tokens that they can understand, which because of business model planning, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
You also mentioned what's your biggest win? If I ask you what was your biggest loss and what was the learning behind that?
So I wouldn't call it. I don't think there's a single biggest loss, but obviously we also lost money. Clearly, right? There was many token projects that just. So I think there were a lot of projects especially that we invested in 21, 22, who frankly the founders were not really, let's call it, it's not even capability. They were probably not very ethical, right, from the perspective, right? Projects fail all the time. We understand that. What is more painful is investing in companies and then realizing later that they weren't really serious to begin with, right? And in 21 and 22, especially in 21, we were still a small company. A whole investment team, the whole finance structure was really built in late 22 and 23, right? Because the whole market just accelerated, right? Yeah. And so at that in 21, 22, so we just didn't hire enough people. I mean, we were very, very small at the time. So we basically made investments in companies that really weren't really serious, right? And maybe the token did well for a moment, but they weren't building something, right? Yeah. And that's something that we obviously don't do anymore, and we're much more careful in that sense. But there were a lot of projects out there So I think that's the part, because again, as I said, you can lose money, but you want the money to be productive. You want to learn something from it, right? And if you don't really do something serious, then there's nothing to learn from. Then it's truly a waste.
What was your learning behind that, and how do you apply in upcoming investments?
I mean, now it's about the team, it's about the legal structuring as well. It's also who else is investing with you, right? And often it's about the purpose of the founder as well. You want to understand the life story of the founder. If it is a mission that is greater than their own, then they will keep trying to get there, right? If it's just about the money, then they'll move to the next project because it has more money or potentially more money, right?
Okay, got it. This will be a quick career advice for someone. Okay. So someone 19 or 22-year-old watching this video right now want to get started into as a VC and want to build their career, what will be the step-by-step process they should follow according to you?
Okay, so first of all, I don't advise anyone to start a career as a VC.
Okay.
Because it might sound glamorous to just like invest and put money and whatever, but the only reason why it works for VCs is because they have expertise. How did they gain the expertise? Because they were working or doing something, right? And so they were able to apply that knowledge and then know what to invest in because they can do research and they can dive deep into that, right? So if you're 18, 19 and you're fascinated about technology, right? Then you learn about technology. Maybe you work in technology. You could be an entrepreneur if you want, right? Or you could work for someone. Then you learn stuff. And then later on, as you become an expert, then you can start investing, right? And if you happen to love fashion, right? And you want to be enter the fashion industry, later on you can become a great fashion VC. I mean, luxury goods is a big industry. So it's not about like, let's go and sort of invest in stuff. What's the advice? Where's the alpha? The alpha will be something that you will know because you're the expert. And you will get things wrong. But remember, when you're working, you're not only going to be learning, you're going to be meeting everyone else in the industry who are also experts and who are smarter than you and who know more than you, and you will learn from them, right? So you grow your network, right? So you have to start working and being in the network. Anyone can put money, but to do it well, you need knowledge.
So if this was our last interview, what would be the one piece of advice you will give to someone you'll leave this world with?
One piece of advice? Yeah. I mean, generally, if it's sort of this penultimate type of question, I would advise people to sort of try to find the purpose that is most meaningful to you. I know that's easier said than done. It's very hard. Some people never find it. Okay. But if you strive in your life to live a life with purpose, then I think you should find your happiness. And it isn't just about, making money. Like from most people, at least from our perspective, money is a means to an end. It's not the end in itself. There's a lot of people in crypto who just care about money. And so I think it's distorted that thinking. But for most 19 or 18-year-olds in the world, they're thinking about money because they want a better life, right? They're thinking about the good life. I want to get married. I want to have, take care of my family, right? That's what they care about, right? And so if you find your purpose, I think you'll find the thing that is important to you, and then the money will come in a way.
How to find the purpose?
I would say I don't know that your purpose changes, right? If you have children, your purpose might change. If you're, I didn't grow up with money, so my purpose was different when I was young versus when I'm older, right? But it has to be meaningful, right? So, it's easy to say, but don't chase the shiny new objects. Look into things that are important to you. And also maybe the other way to think of it is try not to live a life where you do something that you might regret. So, one example would be, I want to make sure that every project we're involved in, we give it our best effort because they could fail.
Yeah.
Right? Very often they will fail, right? And so when they fail, other people might get hurt too because they might have invested in it as well.
Correct.
There's other VCs, and you can't guarantee the success. So how can you ensure that you're still okay with that? To make sure that you gave it your best, as an example, right? So that means it's about integrity, it's about ethics, so that you can still sleep well at night, as opposed to saying, you know what, I just gave up, I don't really care. And then afterwards, you feel regret or you feel like I didn't do the right thing. That actually is worse, right? So in other words, do what you think is right for your mental model, and I think you'll sleep well, and then I think you'll eventually get there.
To get the purpose.
Yes, for the purpose. That's right. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.